Vinod, how did we get this program started in Dharavi with the recyclers?
We started mainly while identifying rack pickers and following them, and we did a survey in Mumbai, basically of rack pickers and their places where they live and where they work, and that took us to Dharavi as the recycling hub, where nearly 40 to 60% of the dry waste comes from. And as we looked at the industry closer, we saw that it was a huge industry worth millions of dollars, and the rack pickers were right at the bottom, and in fact this entire industry survives on their labor, and they were the least paid, they were the most vulnerable, they were the poorest of poor, and it was but natural that we would choose to work with rack pickers. And many of the rack pickers are actually women and children, and these are destitute women, these are women abandoned, these are women who have been thrown out of their houses, and the children also have run away from home, so they're just street children. And it's quite shocking as to that many of the rack pickers are not on any survey, they are not on any list of citizens, they are not in government programs, and they're simply without any documentation. So they're like the invisible workforce of India who clean our roads, but we don't seem to care enough to even include them in our welfare programs.
Well, many of them are migrants as well, aren't they? Both inside the country as well as from Bangladesh and elsewhere.
Exactly, and you're right. And when we say they're migrants, the estimate goes that 500 families to come to Bombay on a daily basis.
Wow.
And this goes on the year. But for these people who work in waste, for them it's a one-way ticket, because these are displaced people from the rural economy. And when you say displaced, it could be that they are dispossessed, they've simply run out of the system, they've run out of money, poverty, disease, or women who are abandoned by their families. And the caste system, as you know, in India is a hierarchy which is very structured and is very implemented ruthlessly in the villages. In the cities, it's like a melting pot where all the caste issues get, slowly.
Right.
Yes. So the caste issue gets underplayed in the cities, and in fact, caste politics in the city is very strong. So the treatment which a lower caste person would get in the villages would not be the same in a city. In the city, it is the Dalit movement is very powerful, and so you would find people coming into a city by trains, mainly by trains, because they can get onto a train without a ticket, and they would be sleeping on the floor, and they'd be thrown out of many trains, and finally they land up in Mumbai. And this is the way the poor land up in Bombay. And when they come to Mumbai, they find that there's no place to live, there's no work, there's no food. And so a lot of the migrant labor who are poor end up living in the landfills or near garbage dumps, because that is the only place the city allows them to live. And the corporation is not interested in removing them from there, because that's like a no man's land. Okay, so they end up living on landfills and working on dry waste. That's how the first job that they get, because they hang around the landfills, is a contractor or somebody, a trader will employ them to say, just pick up all the plastic from me and bring it, I'll pay you money. And this is how they come into the industry, and it's not by choice, it's not by design, it's purely for survival.
Well, in that time, years ago, we visited Navi Mumbai and the big landfill out there. So coming into Dharavi is almost a promotion for some of the waste pickers, because by the time it gets to the landfill, a lot of what's most valuable about the waste has already gone upstream to the brokers. So you might explain how that works as well, the whole relationship between a waste picker and a broker.
Initially, the rag pickers collect the waste from the streets. The fact is that they have to collect it on their back with no kind of mobile a vehicle for them to carry it. They end up carrying the plastic on their sack in huge gunny bags and taking it to the nearest trader, because they may not have they can't carry this weight right up to Dharavi. There are recyclers in every street of Mumbai. So the nearest recycler will get this load, and he may weigh this plastic and pay the rag picker. Most times the rag picker is cheated of the weight by 5 or 10 kilos. So that because those kind of volumes to weigh is very difficult, so they somehow try to, the recyclers cheat the rag pickers. But for the rag picker, it is a living and it is a wage which they're self-employed, nobody pays them. And this relationship is also essential, because most of the plastic that's collected from the houses go into trucks, into the BMC trucks, and those trucks are manned by certain laborers whom even the contractor doesn't pay. In exchange of that, the labor will segregate the waste and sell the plastic and make the money. So as the truck winds itself to the landfill, most of the dry waste is segregated in the journey itself and sold off. And we find that the rag pickers are not a united lot. Since they are moving all the time, we initially tried to unionize them and build a cooperative of rag pickers, and that attempt didn't work, mainly because we found out that by nature they are moving, and they do not want to report to anyone nor follow any kind of discipline, because they may decide to work today and not work tomorrow. And so it was easier to just identify them and give them identity cards of ACORN, and also try and photograph them and document them. That's what we started doing. We initially started doing it in the 13 compound area, that is the industrial sector of Dharavi, where there are more than 1,500 units which are segregating waste. So in that sector we started making members, and ACORN has about 500 members there, and we put up our community center there, which is slowly turned into a segregation center. It has also become a library now because of our work with schools, and we've been working with the American school very closely, which is about 20-25 minutes from our community, from Dharavi. And a lot of the kids from the American school have also visited Dharavi. It's part of the syllabus now, and they are being taught how to the role of rag pickers and how to segregate waste within the school. And every week our members go to the school and collect the dry waste and bring it back to the community center.
And we've done workshops for both the American schools and others on recycling, haven't we? Where it's sort of the fascinating thing of a rag picker, sometimes a very young rag picker, teaching other young people how to recycle.
And we have a documentary called Waste, which is the filmmakers followed about 5 rag pickers around Bombay, and for the children of these schools, it's very interesting to see the lives of rag pickers. And we also see it as a great opportunity for introducing poverty and the life of ordinary residents in slums. So as an introduction to the school and to the school children, it's very important that they understand that slums are not People don't live in such unhygienic conditions out of choice, but it is a failure of the government to provide basic human rights and housing and education and health and dignity that makes people scrounge and live in whatever is available. And this search for livelihood is what makes Dharavi unique as a workers' colony.
The point you were making about the ACORN sort of ID cards is helpful for a couple of reasons, isn't it? Sometimes people following the migrant trail don't have any sort of ID. It makes them no address, makes it harder to get ration cards. How has this really worked out for our members?
Yeah, for our members who have no documentation with them, it can save them from a night in the police station. Some of them have also used it as ID card during voting. So the ACORN card has been very useful for them, and they keep it very proudly with them, and it's a laminated card, and it just shows that in a country like, in a poor country like India, a simple card which is laminated and the strength of community organizing is identified by this card, and this gives a sense of belonging to the rat pickers. And this documentation could be one of the only documentation of their lives.
Well, I know I was here with you one time several years ago at a meeting when we gave out the cards. People were so excited. You would have thought they were winning the Academy Award at Slumdog Millionaire or something like that, but it was wonderful.
Yes.
Our rag pickers, though, actually, what kind of income do they end up making?
They would be making, say, at the end of the day, for around anything between $2 to $4. You know, anything more than $4 a day would be a bonanza. You know, and $6 a day would be like, you know, you'd be eating chicken that night. You know?
There'd be meat in every hutment. But and certainly in India, the level of poverty, there's a lot of people making a lot less than $2 a day.
Yes,
less than $1 a day.
So we have a very fancy planning commission member, Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who is an ex-World Bank IMF official, and according to his study, he says 32 rupees, that is about 50 cents or 60 cents, could be a day is enough for a person to survive, and that would be the poverty line. Anything above 50 or 60 cents, he doesn't consider the person to be poor. I mean, this is the shocking state of affairs in a country, in one of the developing nations of the world. So it's all on people's perception as to what are the human needs, and unless you define human needs and human goals of existence, it's going to be this kind of a debate, you know, when anybody can write a arbitrary figure on a piece of paper and say that this is what a human being needs.
It's often very surprising for outsiders to come visit our project in Dharavi when they find out how hard people are working. I know you've given tours to everybody from the U.S. ambassador to, you know, people from corporations and whatever. The responses are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah. Recently we had a group from Immersion Lab, which from Canada, which was some of the top vice presidents and the head of R&D from all over the world of Johnson & Johnson, and when I took them for a tour of Dharavi, they were really surprised and at the same time shocked at people's diligence, people's dedication to their work, and their self-respect, and the fact that people hardly notice them walking through, and they would give them the attention span.
People are too busy.
People are busy, and it would be like for 5 minutes they would notice them and go back to work. And even the lack of any kind of criminal activity that people could walk around openly, which in most parts of the world it's not possible in a large slum. And this is possible because of the working culture, the working class culture of Dharavi. It's not, it's the informal sector, it is a grey sector, There is a lot of occupational hazards. There is no trade unionism there. People are working in the most unhygienic and poor conditions. But despite that, I would say that it's a glimmer of hope that this entire society, you would say 1.5 million people living in Dharavi, are so proud of what they do for a living, and they are fully aware that the government is not going to give them any kind of dole. There is no security, there is no gratuity, and there is no mediclaim from the government.
Right.
So they are on their own.
Well, Prince Charles, I think, in a book he wrote a couple of years ago, argued that Dharavi was almost a model in the way it combined livelihood and living space. And that's obviously been a key issue for us because Dharavi is under a huge threat for development pressure here in Mumbai. Why don't you tell people what that's like?
It's like these are the two spectrums of the same debate. That on one hand, you have foreign dignitaries who are amazed at the complex social networks of the people of Dharavi and the way the township has developed as a self-sufficient place, producing services, producing goods and products for a city like Mumbai, and subsidizing that labor. And all over the West today, people are studying mega cities and how the poor are able to sustain their livelihoods. And whereas on the other hand, we have our own government, the Indian government, which refuses to believe all this and is out to make a quick buck on real estate of all the things, and knowing fully well that the real estate bubble can just burst any time. The government of the state of Maharashtra, which is of the same party as the Congress party in the center, believes that sees Dharavi as a real estate opportunity, and this international bid which was floated mainly tries to displace nearly about half of Dharavi. And if the original plans were to come into practice, and if they were to implement it, it would be one of the largest displacement of people anywhere in the world. So I strongly believe that this plan is flawed, and it gives me great hope that the Suktankar committee, which is a committee of town planners, architects and bureaucrats, has strongly recommended not going for the government not to go ahead with this plan, and in fact the government has accepted the criticism and is now planning to start the plan in a limited way in each sector. Instead of taking up the whole of Dharavi in one go, they are going to I recently read that they are also trying to change the law that hutments can be transferred. Earlier there was a cut-off date which was 95, which was increased to 2000. So now the government is going to make a specific GR which allows people to transfer their hutments, so the cut-off date doesn't limit them or debar them from being part of the plan.
And I think now, the last time you and I talked about it, it was going to be in stages if there's a relocation, and
Yes.
Clearly the problems that people worry about on relocation is that it's going to be a long way away and a long way away from the livelihood. So clearly the longer this is delayed or stretched out, the better for people in Dharavi.
Yes, even on that front, the uniqueness of Dharavi was that people were living and working in the same space, and most factories turn into housing in the evenings, and part of the factory was also used as a kitchen. So for migrant labor, this saves them time for travel, time to and saves them a lot of resources and funds for living, and this gives them that extra money to save, which they can send back to their families. And the way the Dharavi DRP, the Dharavi redevelopment plan was designed, the housing was separate from the commercial areas and the industrial areas, and people had to choose: either you go take up a residential rehab, or you take a commercial or an industrial. So this separation of living and working spaces, defeats the whole spirit of Dharavi.
The one thing I want to mention, or have you mention before we leave, is that people often don't recognize that there are multiple religions that are able to survive in Dharavi somewhat compatibly, because surprisingly to some outsiders, a lot of the Dharavi population is Muslim, right?
Yeah. Compared to the rest of the city, Dharavi has a much larger proportion of Muslims living there, and which is also much less than the Hindu population. So the majority residents are Hindu, but a substantial number are Muslims. And there are churches inside Dharavi, and all communities live together, work together, and there have been riots, and whenever there has been trouble outside, Dharavi is not, cannot not be affected by such riots which go on. So the work of certain troublemakers seeps in. But what is interesting is Dharavi gets back to work within a couple of days, because people sustain themselves on a daily wage, and without their daily income they cannot survive. So we have seen two types of effects of riots in Dharavi. Is a large-scale migration of people out of Dharavi going back to the villages. Because if a problem goes on, or even if people think there's going to be a problem, they prefer to go back to their villages, or the problem gets over within 2 days and factories reopen.